Are you a victim of bullying? Or worse, are you bullying someone else that you're not aware of? This is a serious topic, and today we're going to talk about stamping out bullying. In this episode of BEA Conversations, we are fortunate to have Lisa Hopkins of Conventions and Incentive New Zealand, and we are really here to identify what are some of the different types of bullying that women go through and how women can really support each other through that experience. Good morning, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Kia ora, Al.
So now I know that this is such a serious topic, and so I'm going to start off with the first question. Have you experienced bullying yourself or witnessed bullying, and how did that make you feel?
Yes, I have experienced bullying firsthand, and what was sad is that it was bullying from another woman in a senior position, and it was at the time you don't. I think part of the problem is at the time you actually don't realize it, you don't see it. And it's not until later on you reflect on everything that's happened, you think, hang on, that wasn't fair, or that wasn't just, and you realize that you really were the victim of a bully. It was pretty bad.
How come you didn't know at that point in time, and only upon reflection then you started to realize that, wow, you were going through it?
I don't know what it is, but I think sometimes a problem with being a woman in business is that you undervalue yourself, or you don't believe as much in yourself, or sometimes even worse, you suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome, and you therefore perhaps don't take as much care of yourself or as awareness of what's going on around you as you should. And because it's almost like sometimes you feel you have to do whatever it is in order to stay in the job, to keep the job, because that, otherwise you'll just get rid of me and I'm indispensable. Well, I am dispensable. And I think that's what was going on at the time. I loved what I did. It was great. I was, traveling, and I was meeting such amazing people, and it was fantastic. But I was working so many hours and just working in such an unreasonable environment that at the time, I guess, it felt like this was normal. My goodness me, how frightening that was.
But Lisa, what are some of the telltale signs of, of an environment that is toxic or a situation that is compromising for women?
Well, I think when you see women, look, and women of all ages, right? So it goes right across the spectrum of all roles. I think what you see women that are really stretching themselves in terms of, work-life balance does not exist. That their focus, that their number one priority is put back onto the job because they're so terrified of not being present or available when required. And I think it's just when they feel like, they perhaps accept criticism as being acceptable, and not really standing up for themselves, not being able to stand up for themselves, being frightened to stand up for themselves in case they lose their job. And that's heartbreaking.
And I think it's such a fine line, because if you look at in business, we are used to being in fierce negotiation, or if you are in your previous leadership roles in corporation, that you have to make tough decisions, and there's a fine line between managing tough negotiation, managing tough conversation that can pivot into a bullying syndrome. So how can we find that balance where negotiations doesn't turn into bullying?
Yeah, that's a really hard one, and to be honest with you, Al, I don't think we've cracked it completely at this point in time. It's going to take a little while. I think that, I think back to my own experiences when when being in a situation perhaps where a customer, is really trying to do a little bit of one-upmanship. Bullying is all about power. I think we know that, right? Bullying is about power. What's worse is when it's a woman who's bullying you as well, because you sort of feel like, where's the sisterhood here? Where's the leaning in? Where's the support of each other? It's very, very difficult. I think women need to remember that what we contribute, what we do every single day is of the highest value. We hold so much within ourselves from in the way that we carry ourselves, the way we communicate, the creative thoughts and ideas we come up with. There's no need for anyone to make us feel down or low or bad or sad or any of those things. But you've got to take that belief in yourself. You've got to start believing it yourself. And I think if you're in an environment, a working environment, where you're given that confidence to say, you are a really important member of the team, we know that you're going to have some hits and we know you're going to have some losses, but we're going to be right behind you every step of the way. That bullying just gets taken right out of the equation. That's what we've got to aim for.
I think earlier we had a conversation that, part of stamping out bullying is actually labeling it, or through better communication.
I think that, as an industry, the events industry, we're really good at helping our customers communicate their messages, their brands, whatever it might be. But it's a little bit like, the plumber who has the worst plumbing, or the builder who has the worst house. Our communication internally is sometimes pretty rubbish as well. I think there's a lot of pressure that goes on. I mean, I would hate to think right now, in the situation that we're at right now, what is happening to people who are perhaps in a vulnerable situation, whether it's, they're losing their job or they're having to renegotiate their contract, trying to win business, and, being taken advantage of by customers, being taken advantage of by the company that they work for. The ability to communicate our needs and to be fair and reasonable sometimes gets taken away from you when you're in a situation of so much pressure. So I think we have to stop a little bit and just kind of think, no, what can I say? What can I do? How can I communicate this better?
Yeah, but how do we label a bad behavior though, Lisa? Like, because obviously during negotiation, tension is always going to be there, but how do you label it without coming across like you're crying wolf?
That's a really good question now. Trust you to ask the tough questions. How do you label it?
Do you say to someone, I'm sorry, like what you said earlier was highly inappropriate and so forth, without, I think at the heat of the moment, sometimes, all the emotions are flying across the room or even across Zoom, that it becomes counterproductive. But how can you actually productively label a conversation and say, listen, this is turning into a bad zone?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think having the ability and the strength and the courage and confidence to kind of go, bring the tone of voice down. I mean, we've all been emotional and het up and all that type of thing, but just kind of clicking in, bringing tone of voice down, perhaps saying, you know what, I don't know if we're going to find a good solution here. Let's just take a step back. Let's go away. Let's think about this. Let's come back. Somehow taking, because, this whole thing is about power, but it's also about emotions. How do you take the emotion and strip the emotion back? I remember once being told by a man in Singapore not to cry over a very stressful situation. And I remember him saying to me, don't you dare cry. Where do you take that? So I remember this so vividly, having to take a deep breath, suppress all my emotions, and look him squarely in the eye and just say, can I have a moment, please? And just walking away. You know what? I did have a cry. I went into the girls' bathrooms and the ladies' bathrooms, got the tissues out, dabbed it all off my makeup, put my mascara back on, put a bit of lippy back on, walked back out and thought, no, not today. You're not going to take me down today.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to just do some of those things just to kind of deflate the situation.
And were you able to go back to that man who did that to you and say, listen, this is highly inappropriate? Like, that language is just unacceptable.
Not then, but I did have the opportunity later. Absolutely.
And what was his response?
Surprised.
Unaware or surprised or?
Very unaware. Very unaware. And you know what, Al, I think that's an important thing to make, because you know what, we could all be accused at some point of bullying. I mean, I've been in very emotional, argumentative situations. I'm sure you have. I'm sure many people have. To me, though, what really defines a person is their ability to take that feedback, not see it as you're bad, you're wrong, you're this, you're that, and label it that way, but kind of go, right, I now need to know what I have to do about my own behavior, because frankly, some people don't know what they're doing unless you tell them.
Yeah, I think that is a brilliant advice, Lisa, because I think when it's very outright bullying, I think that is very obvious. And because that person doing outright bullying will sense that they are actually doing it. But what is so dangerous in the world is we have a lot of psychological bullying that comes in different form, passive aggressively or whatever it is to actually raise the awareness. Because I feel that sometimes leaders do pull ranks, or customers do pull ranks because they are paying, right? And it is such a fine line to be able to go, right, absorb at that present moment, don't take it personally if you are the one at the receiving end, and then wait a couple of days or at a time that is appropriate to go back and say, listen, what you did earlier or weeks ago or months ago is highly inappropriate.
I think that's a very hard, and I'll start again, that is a very hard thing to do. It is a very hard thing to go back to someone who's more senior to you or to a customer and say, what you did, I didn't like that. That was wrong.
Yeah.
But
I think if leaders mean what they say in terms of they're surrounded by a supporting team, they don't want to be, they always say the higher you go, the lonelier you go. I mean, that is attributing to that, because if you're not listening to people around you, then perhaps that doesn't make you a good leader.
Oh, I agree. Somehow that message does need to get back, but there's other ways of doing it. And I think, depending on where you are and look, for women, it's often very, very difficult. It can be very confronting. But listen, there's no training in this, is there? We never taught this at school. We were never taught this at university. We were never shown a way of how do you deal with this in a very confronting person.
Maybe they should be.
Maybe they should be, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. So you've got to find the way that works for you in order to get the result that you're looking for. And for some people, it could be just by simply diffusing the situation. Now, to your point, excuse me, that doesn't help that person understand that their behavior was wrong. But then maybe that's a difficult thing for the person who's receiving that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other ways. But I think if you're a person, and I would say this to leaders of all organizations, excuse me, Al, I just need to take a glass of water.
Please do. I mean, this is an unedited conversation, and we are in real life situations.
And it is water, even though it's 2:30 in the afternoon where I am. And I would say this to leaders of all organizations. The best thing that you can do is if a staff member comes to you and says, I was in a situation where I felt bullied, I felt belittled, I felt ignored, act. You are the one who is in the situation where you can pick up the phone and you can either speak directly to that person or to that person's manager and say, look, I think we have an issue here. This is how my employee felt, and this is what I think we need you to do. This is not to, this person needs help. This person needs to understand their behavior. This person needs to modify. Can you please help them do that?
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, communications is really key. And I think it really takes both hands to clap in a way that I think is about raising awareness. I think if I'm a person that is a little bit more sensitive to certain words or certain key phrases or anything like that, I need to first flag it and just say, listen, please don't go into that area because a certain word might trigger how I would feel in that situation, even though you may not be that way. And then vice versa, the one that were in leadership position or in control, they also need to be aware and sensitive to, I mean, there are some people who they don't really care what you say to them because their skin is so thick and they can sustain it because they are in for it. They are so dedicated and committed and passionate and so forth. But not all people are that way. And I think in the business of people, we just got to be as sensitive. I mean, as aware as possible that we are made up of different types of people, and I think that is the way to sort of move forward and to be able to manage this bullying situation. Don't you think?
I really do. The other thing I would suggest is as well, and this is something that I was very lucky to have, is when I was in Singapore in my role, I had bad days, but I had some really, really god-awful days. The brilliant days far outweighed them, of course. But I had someone who worked very, very close to me, who would come in and say to me, hey, because don't ever play poker with me, Al. You'll know exactly what my cards are. My face tells it all. Who would come in and say to me, hey, when you did this is how you made people feel. And it was like the greatest and most awful revelation that I'd made someone feel bad, but it was the last thing I wanted to do. But understanding that, and I was always impressed by this individual who to this day I just adore dearly. She would always say to me, this is what you're doing, and it would be so helpful. And so then I could have the opportunity to rectify anything that I had, any upset I may have caused with that person. Along the way, Al, I think what that did was it hopefully made me a more empathetic person to the people that were part of my team, and hopefully made them feel that there was someone who had their back all the time. But it really does take the courage of one to stand up and go, hey boss, what you did then, don't do that again.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I shouldn't do that again, and I take that on board.
Yeah, and it is all part of being human, being humane in a way that a leader will say, okay, I wasn't aware of that, and apologize for it, and empowering the team members to voice our opinion. And I think when in a business where we are forced to, or we are expected to provide solutions, we need different voices to come up with a solution that is suitable for customers and stuff like that. And those sort of conversation is like a training ground and a practice towards the real thing when someone is paying you to do so.
Absolutely. Because our people work so hard, and you see the amount of blood, sweat and tears that goes into the solutions that they provide, and only to see them demoralized because a customer picked on something that was just so insignificant and so irrelevant, just for the sake of saying, well, I'm the client here, so you have to do what I tell you to do. That kind of behavior has to go. We've got to get back to this whole partnership thing. We've got to try and find some empathy. My Prime Minister keeps telling everyone, be kind. And that's, I think, something that isn't a bad mantra to live by.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if we are kind, our businesses will sustain longer, hopefully.
Be kind and support each other. Us girls, we need our sisterhood around us just to give us that bolster and give us that support. because sometimes it's still, you know, a tough world out there for us, and dealing with so much.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your time.
You're so welcome, my friend.
It's always good seeing you.